and welcome everybody. It's been a while. The holiday break is over. Hope everyone had a refreshing holiday season and didn't have to work too hard or too much. But now it's time to get back at it. How has things been in the last month or so for you guys?
Yeah, happy 2025. Yeah, it's been wild. I don't know about you guys, but just kind of feels like things keep accelerating and trying to keep up with everything and everyone as the pace increases. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, about the same. It's still technically January, so I guess we can still do the Happy New Year thing for at least a few more days. Just like you two, it's been kind of chaotic, and I think part of it is January. There's not a lot of industry events, and this is the time to start getting content together, start planning for the upcoming year. Just not a lot happens in January, at least for me in terms of travel, and it's been kind of nice, but also kind of chaos trying to fit way too many things. And it was a 4-day week for me this week, and so I tried to cram 5 days of work into 4 work days, and that's always fun.
Yeah, how many times have you guys written the year wrong? Is that still a thing that happens?
I feel like that was more of a thing in school. I got to be
Yeah,
honest, I don't really write the year out
that's
very
true.
often.
Yeah, that's true.
You guys take any time to recharge yourselves or any personal time off?
No,
Not really.
yeah, same here. I mean, it's we did our holiday stuff kind of earlier in the month, so when it came time for the actual Christmas time, the goal is to not leave the house and not do anything, and that's the way I kind of prefer it. So instead of just traveling and going to various relatives' houses and spending a couple hours there, then packing everyone else, and rinse and repeat for 4 days and then driving home. I would much rather just stay and do nothing. That's the way to do it, in my opinion. Kids get to enjoy all their presents,
Yes.
and, stay in pajamas all day. So that I guess has been it's more relaxing than if I would have taken personal time off and traveled places. So take the win
Well, there's
there.
daily recharge time and weekend recharge. Football playoffs, that's been recharging, especially the last 2 weekends where there were games Saturday and Sunday. So just been sitting on the couch watching those and looking forward to doing not too much this weekend.
Absolutely, likewise. Well, as we've always said on this, we could sit and talk about sports, or we could do stories. And since this isn't the sports show, let's get into some stories here. So, we got a handful to discuss today. So let's go ahead and start sharing the stories here. So, in our first story that we've covered here, the let's see. Kaseya's CEO has stepped down. So not much of a context here from the OP, but um, you know, covered by various news channels. This one was linking to CRN, but I think pretty self-explanatory here. Fred, who's been the CEO of Kaseya for how long has he been in? It's been about
A
what
few
10 years?
years at least.
Yeah, a few years
Yeah.
has stepped down, and it kind of came as a shock. There really wasn't any warning or anything to that. So, what are your guys' thoughts on this, or opinions, or things you guys want to say?
That's not going to get me in trouble.
uh,
So I think my thoughts, I think, kind of mirror the general reactions that were in that thread, not just on Reddit, but everywhere that news was posted. Um, Surprising, I thought Fred would be there until Kaseya IPO'd or whatever their next thing was. So did not see that coming, but I'm trying not to speculate on all of the theories and ideas that ended up online of what may have transpired there, other than to say kind of came out of nowhere. I don't know what, if any, impact that'll have on day to day for users of Kaseya. Pretty early to tell if that means anything for them.
Yeah. I actually, I think I'm quoted in this particular article, but the the response or reaction I guess I had was that this hopefully gives them a chance to kind of hit reset with the community at large a little bit, and gives them a chance potentially here, depending on how they use it, to reinstill some confidence in their direction and outreach with the community. So could be a very, very beneficial thing. We'll see what happens. My understanding is Fred's still going to be on their board, but some of the rumors I've heard of potential replacements could really shake things up. So to me, it's kind of a wait and see.
Yep. I think it's definitely too early to we can all speculate and things what's going to happen with this, but on the other side of things too, and I think there's quite a few people echoing that same sentiment as, hey, this could be a change for good. This could be opens up the door for changing things. And I personally don't use many Kaseya products, but just kind of being in the know with the general space, they do have some interesting ideas. I mean, they launched the Kaseya 365 and are kind of trying to become the one-stop shop, but we'd be remiss to we unfortunately know, for better or for worse, the reputation that they seem to have in a lot of different online communities. Whether you're a fan or not, that is something that does come up with it. So again, like you said, hitting that reset button on the community and potentially getting some more support on that, coming from the top down of it. But you can say there's never a dull moment when it comes to these kind of stories. And even when this was announced, there was, as Matt said, a whole lot of different controversies and speculation and back and forth and drama, depending on which social media platform you read the story on. So lots of popcorn to be had. But at the end of the day, I think we're all on the same page, and just, hey, we want things to be better for the community and for the space in general. So, definitely open to whatever changes can make that happen. So, yeah, I think, if you guys want to leave your comments on your thoughts and feelings on this, we'd love to have them. Any comments here, wherever you're watching this or in our MMM Discord, definitely open to that. But let's go ahead and go to the next potentially controversial topic here. So this happened very recently this week. The DHS, Department of Homeland Security, removed all members of the cybersecurity advisory boards and halting the investigation of those boards that were investigating the Assault Typhoon compromise of the United States telecom services. So that's the synopsis here. We'll follow the same format. I'll let you guys go ahead and give your thoughts on this. So, Henry, I'll let you go first here.
Thanks. Yeah, let me touch the third rail. I think the biggest thing out of this is that it stresses the importance of the relationship between public and private industry to support cybersecurity. And hopefully we will see this renewed with a new focus sometime here soon. But obviously, not a great thing to see ongoing investigations and things with CISA effectively cut short. So hopefully we will see a change in direction, or at least some new direction given on this to reestablish those advisory boards and investigations.
Yep.
Yeah, I really echo Henry's sentiment on this. In fact, I mentioned backstage, I don't know that this really is necessarily a third rail controversial issue, other than public and private partnership and working together on things like these, I think, are important. And regardless of the reason or the why that this was discontinued, we certainly hope that it comes back and that this is some kind of reorganization or reevaluation of its need, as opposed to a permanent loss. Don't know, can't really speculate on that aspect of it, other than to say it was doing something good, and now the function or even really program ceases to exist, and that's a bad thing, regardless of the why behind it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and CISA's annual budget is something like $3 billion, which sounds like a lot, but for everything that they've done and everything that they've supported, I believe, unbiased, that it was one of the better departments, branches of the government, especially with all of the free tools that they're providing for education and the things that they're trying to do for even the private sector, like different schooling or local state municipalities and things like that. Trying to raise the bar for cybersecurity. And one of the things with cybersecurity is that it's it's a borderless, cyber warfare, right? It's not like there's no, physical lines or anything like that, right? Whether you're public, whether you're private sector, public sector, if you guys are in allied countries and things like that, working together and that collaboration is what makes us so strong. One of the things that we preach in like the InfraGard chapter is the sharing of the resources and the information, because it makes us all stronger, and it really goes hand in hand with the MSP community. I mean, how many of the communities we have where people are asking questions, and there's not many other communities that I would say out there that are willing to share, this is exactly how we do things. This is, the basically giving away the secret sauce of running businesses, right? Because we're really all in this together, and we're trying to stop cyber threats and to raise the bar. And when things like this happen, unfortunately, then it puts those barriers up, in my opinion, and it makes it harder to combat this and do the right things when it comes to fighting these cyber attacks. So all I can say is I agree. I mean, I hope that there's some sort of restructure. I hope that this is just a temporary measure to readjust or refocus efforts. But we're really hoping that something comes back soon of this.
Yeah, and I think one good thing out of this is kind of stresses the need to network your resources that you have available out there between private and public. So if you are not currently utilizing CISA and the resources they provide, please look into them. As you mentioned, InfraGard is another great resource with different chapters in intelligence that they will share about various threats. And I know like the NSA also has their own resources, NIST. So there's a lot of great public resources that your private company can utilize.
And then there was, some of the things that CISA is doing, especially for schooling and those who might not be able to really afford some of the private sector offerings for cybersecurity, is they have a SCUBA, which is a 365 tenant analysis that helps you determine if you're following best practices and how to fix them. They would do free penetration testing. They would do logging made easy, so you have some sort of SIM tool. I mean, those are just a few examples of what's being offered, and hopefully those continue. Just because this particular advisory board was removed doesn't mean that those things are stopping. But just being aware that if this trend continues, those things unfortunately could happen. And at that point, then we're unfortunately potentially being able to see more and more municipalities or schools affected. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll keep you guys informed. But again, please let us know your thoughts on this. So let's go ahead and get into some community stories here. So covered some news. So let's go ahead and have some discussions around MSP stuff. In our first story here of the community, we have a situation where an employee left and took clients to start his own business. So the OP said one of those buddies that owns an MSP in Northern California had their top tech quit to start his own MSP and took several clients with him. Is that legal? I think there's a lawsuit happening over it. Have you ever had an employee quit and take some of your clients with them? What are you doing about that, or how can we prevent it?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a little after the fact in this case.
Yeah.
That's something that should be part of both employee and client agreements. I'm trying not to answer this with a one sentence thing, but the horse is out of the barn, or whatever expression you want to use on this one. Now that lawsuit may or may not be successful depending on what was in place before. But absent, if this was an organization that didn't think of any of that stuff beforehand, well, there's probably not a lot of recourse there.
Yeah.
I think there's some good comments in the thread though about the idea that it, regardless of what the legal standing is, there's definitely things you should be doing to shore up and ensure that you have good customer relations. So your account managers really should have a feel on the pulse of those clients. And if they're open to leaving with a technician, there's likely a good reason behind that. So identifying what that is and what caused that is obviously a key thing to be looking into here.
Yeah, that was
That's
one
a
of the
really good
things that I
point,
was
Henry.
gonna,
And
oh, sorry. This
I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to add one quick thing, Josh. Henry brings up a fantastic point that this is a risk of, like, when you're very small and you essentially have clients that are owned by individual people solely within the organization. That's when this can happen, right? You know, they feel like they have their tech and their guy. And all of a sudden that the relationship is with that person instead of your company. So that's something to be cognizant of, especially when you're starting out and growing the business.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to touch on it.
Sorry, man.
You stole my thunder. But to give it a personal story, in my first MSP, this is kind of what happened. And I'll get in. Funnily enough, this is the bury the lead to a story that I'll tell later with one of these later stories. But when it came time for me to leave, there was a handful of clients that I was literally the only one. Anytime something came in, they're like, "Well, we'll just give it to Josh. We'll give it to Josh." And I would go out there all the time, and I had a great relationship with them. I would fix their stuff and then just sit and BS in their office. And as a tech, this was like, yeah, this is great. I like the client. I know him in and out. I have a great relationship with him. Everything was good. But then, like you had said, well, if that employee leaves, then you run that risk of that. So having this is where we go to the best practices of standardization, documentation, doing those rotations, so it's not just the same tech always at the same time doing that. Because again, when it did time to leave, and I told those clients, the next thing out of their mouth is, "Where are you going? Because we're following you." And I wasn't going to another MSP at that point, which again, I'll tell that story in a little bit, but I can 100% see that. And in my case, it wasn't malicious at all. Like, I was just doing my job, doing it well, and enjoying them. And it was a decision on the client's part that, hey, they wanted to follow me where I went. And it wasn't me stealing them. Had I actually, instead of going into the restaurant industry, started my own MSP, it could have been the same story, and there would have been no, it wouldn't have been me like, "Hey, I'm trying to underhand my old boss and screw him over and steal all the clients." It just would have happened naturally. And going into the legal thing, whether it's non-complete or MSA clauses and things like that, I lived it, man. I can see how easy it is for that to happen if you fall into that trap of, just doing that dedicated tech per client.
Well, and kind of an inverse story is we had let someone go, and they approached a couple of our clients trying to take them with after the fact. And we had a good enough rapport and relationship with those clients that they came to us to let us know that was happening. And obviously we will retain them, but it happens in either direction, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of how to Matt's point, it's laying that groundwork up front. And in this guy's case, it sounds very retroactive.
There did remind me of a funny story where there was a tech that was hired, and he wasn't a very, not only was he not a good tech, he was doing some shady stuff that we found out afterwards. And what we would do is he'd be sent out to somewhere to go do work, and then he would arrive there and say, "Hey, like, I'm really sorry, I'm like triple booked, I don't have time for this, so can I come back out? I can come back after hours and do this on my own today, but it would be with my company, and I'll charge you $50 an hour, whatever it is." Like, undercut it. And then he would go to the clients who were signing him to, and then try to like undercut it so he would get the money later, basically saying that we're too busy for him, but thankfully he can get him in. And we discovered it not too long afterwards. But it was funny listening to one of the owners of that MSP. He had a great relationship with the client, so he's kind of giving him crap, and he's like, "And you didn't tell me this like as it was happening. Like I had to fire this guy and find out." So that's another unfortunate thing that can happen. So yeah.
Just one more thing on this before we move on. We talked about the one direction. Without giving legal advice, just make sure that your agreements with clients also consider the other direction when they try to poach one of your employees. There are a number of strategies like that. One of the classic ones is just making it possible, but an exorbitant fee if you need to poach an employee, right? I've seen like a year's salary as a fee for doing so, things like that. Just make sure you include that in some way, because we've seen it attempted, and the way that our agreements were structured ultimately prevented that.
Yep, there's lots of things to keep in mind when it comes to this, but I think we all solved the world problem on this one. So I think we're ready for the next story here. If we want to bring that back up. This is another interesting case where a remote worker hired their own IT guy. So they have a client with a co-owner who moved far away from the office they support. Everything was great. We had an RMM agent, endpoint protection, everything like that. Other software on there. So he got an alert that, hey, their EDR was removed, and they find out that co-owner got their own IT guy, and he removed their software and put his on. This was odd because we're talking about the owner who executes contracts and agreements with the client. It opened a security risk, open liability. So we informed them that, hey, we must have our agent endpoint protection on so we can oversee or can't support them. And having an unknown third party fixing stuff is no bueno. And they haven't gotten a response. So he's actually looking for other input if they ran into a situation like this before and how it was handled.
I'm going last this time to not steal someone else's answer.
Oh gosh, I have not run into that personally, but I think I would be leaning heavily on whoever your point of contact is with that account and the management and contract that you have there to try and handle that. Gosh, yeah, that would be an interesting situation.
Is this something that's ever happened where you get somebody splits off from a client and then hires their own IT? I think the example that comes up for me in my time has been supporting a realtor business for real estate, and how this particular one was set up is all of the agents were under the umbrella of an agency, but technically each real estate agent was their own their own individual business, but they all operated under the umbrella. So each of the individual realtors had their own IT, but then they would go to the office of this, and then we had to support the firewall and the network and everything. But then if somebody were slow, they would blame the network. But then there's no standardization, the printers don't work, and then some of them have their own IT guy. So it was just this kind of mess that was impossible to support. Is either of you encountered anything like that?
That I suppose, yes, because we've had a contract with a collective of big box stores that we were supporting, and inevitably run into a plethora of vendors and contractors that you need to work with, and there's a lot of finger pointing that goes on. But yeah, having clear documentation, labeling, and so forth is really key in those situations. Suppose that kind of gets into a little bit of co-managed situations. But yeah, having clear delineation on who's responsible for what. Otherwise, yeah, it's just going to be a dumpster fire.
In this particular case, what advice would you give this company asking what to do?
stop configuring your stuff so that somebody else can remove your agents and endpoint protection in the first place? Like, why is this even possible?
That's a good point. If they had the anti-tamper on there, then it wouldn't have, or shouldn't have worked.
Not just anti-tamper. Like, do these people have admin access?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, and yeah, there are things around like application whitelisting, and there are other things that could be done to ensure that at least they know when someone's attempting to.
Yes. I mean, honestly, though, that's my big takeaway, that this was kind of set up to happen, because a threat actor could also go up and remove the endpoint protection and, you know, install something malicious or anything like that. I have had clients that had not separate IT, but like kind of remote hands for satellite offices that would just help with plugging in firewalls, or if we had to reset something or that kind of thing. But yeah, like, to me, this seems like a bigger configuration, just client architecture issue, and yeah, they have an administrative conversation to have as far as who's responsible for what, but something got missed if they're in this position in the first place.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, well, we got that one. So that brings us to our next story, and I think this will be a good one where it's less so advice, but more so let's tell some stories of our experience and time in the MSP space. So this one I thought was particularly fun. There's quite a few good stories in this thread, but what is your standout F this moment? So the OP asked, we all had our breaking points eventually, whether it's with a customer, a vendor, a piece of technology, or the industry. So you guys want to share a time where you just threw your hands up and were just like, F this, I can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, typically that ends with firing a client. I can think of a couple instances where I will not tolerate myself or our staff being verbally accosted. So those types of situations. Also had an interesting one with a gentleman that was going through some mental issues that increased his paranoia, which was an interesting situation where he was convinced out of his rather large organization that everyone was a government spy. So that was one that we gracefully bowed out of carefully. But yeah, I mean, there's always some interesting stories to reflect on. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, I feel like, yes, aside from the egregious, this is going to lead to firing a client moment, you almost don't really have the opportunity to say F this in a lot of cases, right? You do have to deal with that vendor. You do have to deal with the difficult problem. You don't have to deal with the disrespect, to your point, Henry, but even the thorniest technical issue, you do have to, like, just put your game face on and go through it. Now that does mean you might, like, scream into a pillow, or like go behind the filing cabinet in the client's office and say a few choice words. We had a number of the ones that always frustrated me and my team were when we had vendors who were not only uncooperative but frankly antagonistic, where it just became a game of attempting to blame the network versus the application for everything. There were a couple of notable VoIP vendors that did this for a while, and it got into this situation of you almost had to prove, okay, the network is configured the way you set it to. There's enough bandwidth. There's low enough latency, right? That's not the issue. Can we get to actually diagnosing the problem? So for me, it wasn't any kind of technical issue. It was really any time that you had to go through this big fight to even start working on the root and core of the problem. That's when I would get very frustrated, because like,
Yeah.
you're here trying to solve the client's business problem, and you have to jump through this hoop or get through this wall of defense that either the vendor or other provider or et cetera would put up. The client was disrespectful. Yeah, to Henry's point, you just fired the client.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, typically if the client's disrespectful to you or your staff, they're disrespectful to their own employees and everyone else. So people will be understanding of that plight. We did used to do a fair amount of direct wiring and structured cabling type of stuff, and I do recall an instance where there was a someone upset that we had received the that portion of this particular job for a client, and they had gone through and cut all of the network cables that had just been run.
You've got to live that meme of the picture where it shows all the network cables cut. That actually happened to you? Oh man.
Yeah. Not at the switch, but yeah, they did it midline in near a IDF. So yeah. How about you,
That
Jeff?
must have been fun.
Yeah, so the one that I was going to bring up, and that's what I alluded to earlier, my moment, which actually made me leave the MSP space and go back to the restaurant space for a couple of years. My first MSP that I was at, and I was there for about 5 years, and it was smaller. At two owners, there was a website design side and then like the IT side. And the owner of the IT side decided that he wanted to take more of a back office role, less of a management role. So he had the most senior of our team, which was 3 people at the time, become the IT manager. And we had been working side by side for years at this point. So we really didn't need a manager. We were self-sufficient. At this time, though, a couple of years later, we hired on like 2 or 3 more techs and stuff like that. And as soon as he was made the manager, it kind of went to his head where he started micromanaging everybody. And he just changed, and it was odd because, again, this is somebody that I've worked like side by side with for years, and now all of a sudden, like, they're questioning bill of hours and things like this. And like, I had I was doing the most tickets and stuff, so I was never like not meeting my goals. But he started getting really critical and kind of bringing it down, which is in itself is annoying. But we signed on a couple county clients, and at this point, this is when I had had a first kid, and then our second kid was on the way. And with the second kid, at that point, the daycare bill would have been more than our mortgage. So my wife and I had to make the decision where she had to stay home, and I would just have to get a second job in order to pay the bills and keep our family fed. So that is when I got a part-time job working at this restaurant, and we had this meeting where he said, "Hey, we're signing on this county, and they have a police department that may need 24/7 support, so you need to be available all the time." And I let him know, like, "Hey, if they call me, like, I might be able to answer, but I can't guarantee I'm going to get it. We have 5 other techs. Can we do some sort of rotation or something? Like, I can't guarantee I'm going to be there because I need the second job to pay the bills." And the entire time before this, even though I was the most junior person, I was always the person technically on call, even though we didn't have like an on call. Like, it would just come to me. Probably not the right decision, but I didn't think of it at the time. And instead of willing to work with me, he decides his exact quote was, "If you can't be available to answer your cell phone, maybe you need to rethink your career." And that was kind of the start of the downfall, where I was just instantly like, "I don't know what you want me to do. Like, I need this extra income, and like, there's 5 other techs that can answer the phone, man. Like, it's just ridiculous." And the straw that really broke it was I was working on there was some sort of Outlook or Exchange product. And that day, because again, our second kid was due, we adopted a dog. And me being gone at 2 jobs and the dog being energetic and having my wife pregnant and with a newborn, we unfortunately just couldn't handle that dog, and it sucks. We liked our dog, but I had to make the difficult choice to give it back to the rescue, which was about an hour away. So I said, hey, I unfortunately have to give the dog back to the rescue, so I'm going to be late this day, and basically took a half day PTO, gave him a 2-day heads up. And then as I'm coming back, I'm still about an hour away. He starts calling me stating that I need to come back now because like this project needs to get done. And at this point, it was documented, and literally any of our staff would have been able to help with like this Outlook part. And it wasn't business like impacting. It was just like a finishing up of it. So either A, it could have waited, or B, it was documented enough to hand off to somebody to fix it. And you just kept harping on me, and that's when I was like, dude, this is enough. And the restaurant where I was at, I was friends. The reason I was there is one of my best friends is the regional manager. So I was, telling him about it at the end of the day, and he's just like, hey, well, we're opening 2 stores. You just want to be a manager for me? Like, what's your number? And, gave me the raise. So I only had to work 1 job, and I left the MSP world for a couple of days after that, or a couple of years after that. So that was my biggest F this, where I was just like, dude, what do you want me to do here?
I have one more that comes to mind, honestly, just because it's funny. Had a client that was a manufacturing shop, and so as a result, they had ABC shifts, and somebody, whoever was on call for us, got a call that their hand scanner wasn't working. Right, so they wanted those biometric employee check-in systems, so they didn't have to like type in username and passwords to clock in and out. This person was troubleshooting for like hours, and eventually called me and woke me up and had worked on it with them. And after nothing was working, we decided to roll out, at about 2 in the morning or 1 in the morning, go out there. And turns out that someone had reset it after a power outage by plugging a USB keyboard cable into an Ethernet jack. It just barely fits in. And man, I was not happy about that. Was not in a good area of town. Blew up my meeting schedule for the next day, and we decided to just go to the bar right after that. The place was next to a bar that hadn't closed yet, and oh man, that was close to an actual F this moment. Survived, made it through.
So kind of a reoccurring theme here is most people aren't calling the help desk when everything's going right. So there's some soft skills absolutely that techs need to have in order to handle those unhappy individuals. And there's a good book I would recommend for a lot of people on help desk. That is The Help Desk Habits by Mark Koopman. Has a lot of great stuff in there, that including how to deal with some of those more escalated conversations with individuals. So just wanted to throw that out there as a resource.
And I would, Henry, I don't know what you tell your staff, but in my organization, it was always, if the conversation starts going that direction, shut up and get your account manager to have it instead.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, looks like we got one more story here. So last story of the day we have.
It's fresh. It's from today.
Fresh. Yeah, it is. Where do you draw the lines on requests for your inclusive clients? As we have some fully managed clients that ask us to turn on and off their out of office, set up email rules for them, make tweaks and customizations quite frequently. Do you send how-to guides, charge extra, or just reassess a contract reviews? We start to feel at some point more like administrative assistants than IT. What are your guys' thoughts on this one?
So for us, it was always kind of a judgment call, in that we tried to not do things that were production or operational. and differentiate between I don't know how to turn on out of office, which I guess is still possible, versus we're using you to not have to do it. But it's also the kind of thing, kind of like, writing a change request for a 1 hour, out of scope thing. Like, it's just not something, it's not a hill to die on unless it starts getting abused. If over the course of a month or two, you get a couple of those tickets, you kind of just eat it because it's not worth deteriorating the relationship. But if we feel like the client was starting to take advantage, that's when you would start having a conversation about it. But the guideline was things that were like production and operational stuff, we would not do. Things that they got stuck or had a question on, then we would help them.
Yeah, I mean, from my aspect, one of the things when I was on service desk, I would always do is the help and education. Like, I have no problem doing this, but hey, let me show you how to do this, and provide a work instruction, as well as hey, walking them through doing it and things like that. So that way they knew how to do it for next time, or at least had the work instruction to go off of. It might not work with every client, but I found good success in that. There was more clients than not that were appreciative of it, and they were like excited, like, oh, I know something new about computers and stuff like that, and they were eager to learn. That wasn't the case with everybody, but I would say 75% were really liked that approach of the clients that I helped.
Yeah, I think if it becomes a ongoing issue, either there needs to be a PITA variable in your costs to that particular client, or you need to be looking, if it's recurring on a wider scale and you see value in it to your clients, then you need to be building out those FAQs and resources for your clients to lower the cost on you providing those answers and help and educating.
Absolutely. All right, well, I think we did it then. We're coming up to about our time. Anything you guys want to plug or anything you say? I think it is, what is it, National Education Day. So any, in the spirit of that, any education resources you'd like to share? The one that comes to top of mind for me, especially around the cybersecurity space, I'll plug is the Black Hills Information Security. They have a fantastic community resource, and they do have a lot of pay what you can, including, if you can't pay anything, cybersecurity training, especially around SOC analyst roles with their anti-siphon training. So if that is an interest, or you're, hey, how do I break into this? How do I get training? I highly recommend checking them out. They do a lot of free education when it comes around to that sort of thing with cybersecurity.
Main thing from my end is we have a number of IT Nation events coming up, so I will shamelessly plug IT Nation Secure coming up, and IT Nation Europe is actually coming up very soon as well. So the goal of all of these events is to be purely educational, not just sitting through a bunch of product pitches. So come check that out, and there will be a lot more coming about Secure as we start ramping that up in the next month or two.
Awesome. Something that I think both of you have probably been in part of is Bob Miller's IR games. So great free resource for people to get involved with. There's I believe, monthly run IR game that you can partake.
Yep, I'm one of the facilitators of that. So that is coming up next Friday. Actually, we usually do it the last Friday of every month. So next Friday we do have our business email compromise game, and again, cannot recommend how useful that is for learning how to deal with the day-to-day happenings of an incident. So, all right, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Henry and Matt, thank you guys for joining, and we will see you guys next Friday.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
has been a broadcast of the MSP